So welcome everyone. We are honored today to be able to speak with Mikhael Doueihi. He is a good friend of the World Affairs Council and a former board member of our council. Let me give you his background really quickly because he's got a lot of interesting things to tell us. So he was born in Lebanon, but he moved to the US in 1975 when the Civil War broke out, and he attended Bradley University. So for those of you who are here from Bradley, he is a fellow alum. He has a degree in electrical engineering and a master's in business administration, advanced management at IMD in Lausanne. Is that right? He also has Lausanne. Okay. He also holds an international patent for an electronics invention. Several senior and executive or leadership positions at Caterpillar, where he retired. He was also a director and a board member at Caterpillar Brazil, manager of the engines and energy business for the Far East and Australasia, then global manager for the 200 to 800 horsepower engines. He has visited over 70 countries, and he has lived in 5 other countries other than Lebanon, the United States, France, Switzerland, Brazil, and China. He was active at St. Charbel's here in Peoria and on the board of directors, as I mentioned, with the Peoria Area World Affairs Council. He's also been a contributor to the strategic planning of the city of Piracicaba in Brazil. He returned to Lebanon in 2014 and founded the Association for Charity and Development. He did run for the municipality of Jakarta in 2016. Have I mispronounced that terribly? Jakarta? Active in the beatification of Patriarch Doueihi, who is former president of the Patriarch, and I'm sorry, Mikhael is former president of the Patriarch Doueihi Association, builder of a basketball and tennis court in Eden. He is member of the Maronite League, formerly active in the Maronite Extension Committee. He is a founding member of the Christian Association for Development in Education and Family. And he was an activist, and I'm assuming a continuing activist, in the October 17 revolution. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mikhael, but the first one of those was held in 2019, raising issues about sustainability, development, corruption, the environment, heritage, of a wide variety of social issues. He heads the Association for Charity and Development, which is an investment in his own community in Jakarta. They participate in various charitable activities, including the distribution of food rations since the beginning of 2020, human and public development, vocational training, financial support for some small and medium-sized enterprises, and strategic planning for the old Jakarta, revival of the Dubke and Hadnayev and Kamis al-Zakara Festival, the Kebe Festival, studies on agricultural opportunities and craftsman works. Currently, he is helping launch the market of craftsman works from dedicated center in Jakarta and on social media platforms. So this is what you do in retirement, Mikhael.
This is what I'm doing for retirement. That's correct. In fact, that's how I wanted retirement to be anyway. So, and I'm glad I'm doing it. It's, I mean, I could have played golf in Peoria, but I prefer to come and do something different. They need me here a little bit more than just playing golf. It's been busy. Sure. I love it.
Yeah, well, you've certainly been making use of your time. Do you want to share your presentation and take us away?
Let me see if I know how to do that correctly. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Yep, so you need to do that for me.
Using the wrong mouse. I need to make you a co-host. I'm sorry. I forgot to do that when we were chatting. All right. Now you should be able to share.
Now we should be able to share. So how do I do this?
If your PowerPoint is open, at the bottom of your screen, you have a green button that says share screen, and then it'll That you're doing it. There you go.
Do you have it shared now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so let's see whether I can. Okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is to give about probably 2 or 3 quick slides about Lebanon, the country, the little bit of on the government structures and all that. Then my views of why do we have problems in Lebanon, and then today how we look, and most of the people of Lebanon as well as the international community see how we can get out of the situation if we have a will to get out of the situation. The Republic of Lebanon, can you all see the screen? I have the flag on the right-hand side. I have a map on the right-hand side showing the location of Lebanon in the Middle East, you know, versus vis-a-vis geographically the other countries. It's a state that actually exists or became as known today with its borders in 1990 and 1920. After World War I, established at that time by France. It became a republic in 1926, but it achieved independence from France in 1943, and Lebanon today is a member of the Arab League. It's a multi-party democracy. We have a legislative house, which is headed usually in Lebanon. There is a distribution of power by religions. And for good reasons. I do not want to blame anything, or I do not want to criticize that. There were good reasons at the time when these happened, that they decided that the head of the legislative house, the parliament, will be a Shiite Muslim. Distribution of power, the head of state will be a president, will be the president of the country, be a Maronite Christian. And there is a distribution of authority and what any one of them can do or not do. And the head of the cabinet, which is the executive part of the government, is the prime minister and is headed by a Sunnite Muslim. And usually there is distribution also within, you know, the ministries by religions also, by the different religious groups. Lebanon traditionally is ethnically a mixture of almost any old civilization and current civilization you can think to. It's a country of intersection between Africa, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Europe. So everybody used to go, you know, through that country, take it over for a while, and leave us a little bit of their culture and leave. So that's really in a quick shot, you know, what the country looked like geographically, which is kind of unique from its neighbors. Lebanon is a mountainous country sitting on the beach. It has mountains that go up to 3,088 meters high, which is about 9,000 plus or 10,000 feet high. It's a small country, but only 10,000 square kilometers, or in miles, about 4,000 miles. Population, now we don't know really what the population is of Lebanon. We think it is 4.5 to 5 million Lebanese registered. Maybe about 1 million of them today are out. We do have probably about 2 million between Palestinians and Syrians, although a lot of Syrians or some of them have left, so we don't know how many of them are still here. I think the interesting point about what you see is the bottom, is where the gross national income has dropped. Now it is shown that it has dropped from $37,000 per person, or per income, to, I would say today it is about 3,000, because the currency keep going down and the purchasing power really is deteriorating. When I look at the distribution, because I talked a little bit about religion and the distribution, we can see that the nation, when you look at the top table, over time, how the distribution has changed between what I call the Christians, the Maronites, the non-Maronites, but they are still Christians, and Armenians. Non-Maronite Christians could be Protestants, could be Greek Orthodox, then I have lumped basically the Sunni, the Shiites, and the Druze. Now, they are different sects of Islam, although some of them may not have the same views as Islam. And probably the one that is kind of unique from the two above is the Druze. It's a very special community. But over the years, the percentages of the population distribution has changed. And then because we do not have a census recently, so I took the voters distribution in 2021, and we can see that the country, plus or minus, is about 1/3 of total Christians and 2/3 Muslims, and then there are a few others that are not. It's a fragile balance of distribution because we share power among all of these. There has been struggles in the country over the past tens of years, which has been sometimes been able to happen just because there is a military presence either by the Palestinians back in the 60s and 70s, then by the Syrians who came in and occupied the country, and then certainly today by the Iranians / the Hezbollah who tried to take over the country. So the military presence of other groups with allegiances to neighbors and external powers have caused some serious destabilization of the country and caused us to go into bloody wars over the last many years. I tried, the last couple hours to put that there are many political parties in the country. Most of them are religiously divided. They can claim differently, but the National Bloc, the Lebanese forces, the Kataib, the Armenian groups, they're basically Christian. The Hezbollah and Amal, they're basically Shiites, if not pure Shiite. The Future, which is Hariri, it's a mainly Sunni party. Then the Druze have their own parties. The revolution of 2019 have generated over 500 small groups today. And we're trying to organize in opposition of what I call the traditional. The traditionals are the ones that are above, okay? I probably have missed a few other smaller ones, but in general, for the general purposes, there are political parties. There is a democratic process that keeps going on, even though that occasionally and sometimes like today, some groups, have military muscles and they try to exercise it and impose their will on the rest of the population. In my personal view, my personal assessment, the main issue that we have in Lebanon is that there has never been an agreement on the identity of Lebanon that the Lebanese groups have agreed on. We never agreed on what is this identity, what is the role of Lebanon, what kind of positions we take internally or on foreign affairs. What allegiance do we have? Some people, try to push toward the Arabs, and we are an Arab country today. And some today try to make us more Persians also. They don't call it that way, but really it's a religious issue. But we don't agree. We don't agree actually on what is the Lebanon that we want. And that's why we keep fighting each other. And then at the same time, anytime somebody comes in from outside, especially from the neighbors, we used to have Egypt at a certain time, 50 years ago, at the time of Nasser, talking of the Arab unity. Most of the Muslims in country, and especially the Sunnite at that time, they said, we'll join the Arab unity. Okay, when the Palestinians in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, they wanted to use Lebanon as a base, to attack Israel, and then later on to take over Lebanon. certainly some Lebanese groups stood by them, basically using the Palestinian military power to take over the country for themselves. Now we have Iran, who's trying to really close its grip on Lebanon, you know, using Hezbollah, who wants to annex Lebanon to Iran and make it basically a subgroup of Iran. We call it a Wilayat al-Faqih, which is a heresy created by Khomeini. I mean, the Shiites doesn't all agree that there is something like the inspired al-Faqih, that they are waiting for his return. So this is what we're going, in my opinion, through today. Now, there are other problems that has been happening that made this possible. Politically, the people that took over the country over the last 40, 50 years, they really never resolved this above issue identity. They never moved to a civil society, and they kept busy with corruptive actions at all levels and in all activities. They just kept busy, you know, putting money in their pockets. And what helped them is that, especially in 1990, you know, this got exacerbated by Syria, who wanted to control the country, so they needed puppet with them, and they needed to feed them. So corruption really exploded. These politicians never exercised their responsible duties and created social programs and gave the citizen, you know, they never improved their lives and gave them social securities and economic security and all that. So that's a failure of these politicians too. And at the same time, all of this alongside with the positions that we take on the international scene and internally, today, the government or the people in power, they lost complete trust internally and internationally. All of this definitely have helped Hezbollah to try to think that this is the time that he can take over the country. So there was a failure of the politicians, the way they exercise their duties. At the same time, they really, most of them are in my opinion, ignorant. I mean, they do not understand financials and economics. They never did any economic development strategies, and they relied only on services, banking, tourism, transit, and all that, while they ignored or they allowed to really get many of the other income, like industries, technology, agriculture especially, so that we can export and bring in some foreign currency. The country, they never developed the country to be friendly to do business. I mean, the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the corruption at highest levels discourages everybody, locals, immigrants, as well as foreign entities, to come into the country and invest. We do not have any auditing nor accountability for anything that takes place in the country. It's everybody can do basically or almost anything they wish illegally, you know, over the system. There has been intervention by the cabinet on the central bank, who in turn has lured the banks to make profits and created Ponzi schemes, and they ended up by bankrupting the country. They basically robbed our money. So it's an issue. It's a big issue. Corruption, like I mentioned, hyperinflation, that's what we go through today. The currency has devaluated today by 20 times. So, and the salaries have not changed. So purchasing power is down to earth. Used to buy a bag of bread, for example, 2 pounds of bread. We used to buy it, let's say, and in Lebanese lira, 750 or 1,000 Lebanese lira. Today it is 10,000. But the people are still making the same amount of salaries. You know, the kilo of meat used to be 17,000 2 years ago. today it is 350,000. I just filled my gas tank. We used to fill it up with 17,000. I just filled it up today with 320,000. Now, people can no longer afford to eat. You know, over 50% of the Lebanese people, they cannot have meat during the month except like 1 pound of meat or 2 pounds of meat per month. And about another 20, 30 of them, no, about 50% of them, they cannot have any meat. Another 20, 25%, they can have probably about 3 pounds or 4 pounds of meat. And there is only 1 or 2% of the population that has been able to afford to eat a little bit better. And thanks to, you know, I said 50% of poverty, basically almost zero income. The other 50, they're able to survive because about 400,000 out of the 4 million Lebanese left the country. And they are professionals and they are working overseas now. They left, I mean, the last year and a half. So they are sending money back to their families so they can afford to eat. Okay. So, and many items on the shelves are missing. I mean, it's like you go to Kroger or like you go to any place in Peoria. Most of the shelves now here in Lebanon, they're empty, especially with the foreign goods. Now, one other problem we have is Lebanon is a very tiny country, and it has never had a critical mass to produce anything important anyway. So we import over 80% of what we utilize or what we consume. What is required from the government? And that is something that almost all Lebanese agree on. It doesn't mean that they all want to do it, but they all agree that this is what will take us out. And that's what the international community believes, that that's what it takes. Number one, we need to install a non-political, competent cabinet. That means a cabinet that is completely independent of all the political parties. Lebanon has to demonstrate its sovereignty over its total territories. That means do not allow the smuggling, like Syria bluntly say, I want to take your dollars, I want to take the flour from you, I want to take your gasoline, I want to take your diesel, whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, I'll just move my troops into the country. So, and we have people that are benefiting from that, Lebanese benefiting from that. So we don't have sovereignty over the country. We don't make decisions over our internal affairs nor our foreign affairs. Basically, Hezbollah controls the country today to a large extent. We must free the judicial system and give him the power and the security so that it can exercise its role. In addition, we must perform forensic audit on all institutions, starting with the major ministries, but throughout the whole government bodies and every activity. We must regain confidence internally and internationally. And my judgment is almost 100%, or at least 95% of all Lebanese, including the ones who do not want this to happen, but they agree that this is what will take us out. But it's not happening. None of this is happening. Where we are today on the urgent issue, you know, at least we need people to survive. We need people to survive, you know, food, electricity. I told Angela before we started, although I have, you know, some UPSs and all that in the house, but electricity, we barely get 2 hours of electricity a day. Other than that, people have to buy electricity from an investor who gives you electricity, but a lot of people now can no longer afford it because you have to pay him. And he costs about 20 times more than per kilowatt hour, more than the national electricity. But national electricity, national company gives you 1 or 2 hours a day at best. Medical shortages. If anybody gets sick today, there are many people, diabetes or any, and they just don't take their medicines anymore. It just doesn't exist in the country. Only 1 or 2% of the people can afford to take medicines, and they import medicines from outside. My wife traveled to Europe to see my daughter. She brought a full case of medicines to people here. My daughter came, she brought full case of medicine. My son-in-law came, brought a full case of everybody who travels outside the country. The number one thing in their suitcases is medicines for friends and other people because it doesn't exist. And the other thing is that we believe that we must execute the parliamentary elections, which is due in about 5-6 months or maybe earlier, but it has to happen. And there are many groups that are in control of the country that do not want it to happen so they can stay in power. Now, I said too many things and I said them probably quickly, but I am open for questions.
I would like to start with one. You mentioned the expense of the immigrants, the refugees from Syria, perhaps Iraq, certainly the long-time immigrants from Palestine. What other impact, other than the economic impact, are they having on Lebanon? Are they, because they're refugees from Syria, are they part of the Shia problem with Hezbollah, or are they different?
Yeah. Certainly the refugees issue, you see, we started to forget some of our issues because now we really want to eat. We want to have electricity. Now the Syrian refugee issue has been an issue, continues to be an issue because Lebanon accepted the highest percentage for its population of the number of refugees. They are next door. You know, we share with them a lot of the culture anyway, and they had to run away from their, from the regime. So the first place they could come to was Lebanon anyway, and we provided them, with jobs and all that, although they took jobs away from the Lebanese. But then the other thing is the infrastructure of Lebanon cannot afford about 2 million when we are only 4.5, 5 million. And so the electricity, the sewer system, the water, everything, we just cannot afford to have another 2 million over what we have. And that was a major issue that caused a lot of breakdowns in the systems too. And this continues to be a problem. Now, the Syrians themselves, many of them certainly that are in Lebanon, they are sharing with us our problems, but many of them are much, much better off than the Lebanese because they still are getting paid by the international community, some of it in US dollars, some of it in Lebanese pound, and they have somebody taking care of them. The international community, they are taking care of them. Nobody is taking care of the Lebanese other than the Lebanese, but that's our problem anyway. So yes, the refugees has been a problem. We tend to forget to put it now as an issue, but that's because we have more immediate issues today.
What percentage of your population is that 2 million? Is that about a quarter of your population?
Well, when you look at how many people reside in the country today we have probably about 7 million, 2 out of 7. So you have about 30%.
Yeah, that's a sizable issue to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, and they are spread all over the country.
So, with your question about identity, what identity do you think Lebanon should adopt? What are the key features of Lebanon that you would like to see the country embrace?
Number one is that we need as Lebanese to agree that Lebanon is the nation of all Lebanese, and it is not the place for others to be in Lebanon, like people that feel that they are really part of Syria, or people believe that Lebanon must be a Saudi Arabia or an Iran, or like in the past in Egypt, or now some people think that we must be part of Turkey. We have communities in Lebanon, they never identified Lebanon as their country and their only country. Their allegiance is for Lebanon. Lebanon, the one who has all of these communities, living together as a representation of of a diverse community, we never agreed to that. And the politicians that took over the last 30, 40, 50 years, they never really moved us from this diverse community to become a single community. That's because they never worked on social justice. They never worked on social programs so that you get your economic security directly from the government. Like in Peoria, if you have an issue, you go to the state office, you go to the government. Here you go to the leader, or you go to the religious guy to help you. So we tend to believe, whether we are wrong or not, is that the politicians caused it to be this way so that we continue to have allegiance to them, to their family. They are feudal anyway, and we don't go to the government. But if they would have moved us to that we become a civil society, that we all believe in the same country, and we all pay our dues to the country, and we all respect our country, and we continue to prosper our country, not our sect or our political party or our leader. So my view is that we should move to that state, like the way we have it in the US. And many Lebanese would love to see that, in my opinion.
And I hope we don't revert to something more sectarian in the United States. We also have issues, but nonetheless, so there are a couple questions kind of related to the makeup of Lebanon. Robert asks, before Lebanon became a contemporary state, wasn't it part of Syria? And if so, how and why did Lebanon separate from Syria? And I'm going to lump in the next one as well. Is there an Assyrian Christian population in Lebanon?
You asked me 20 questions. I lost the last one, but don't forget it. You asked me the very last sentence later, but okay. There is a disagreement in Lebanon, certainly, about what is the history of Lebanon. Lebanon existed before Syria even existed, and you can find that in the Bible anyway. We don't need to explain that. Lebanon existed, and Syria did not exist when Lebanon existed. There was a geographic area that used to be called Syria, and there used to be a geographic area called Phoenicia, which used to extend into Syria. So, you know, this is a disagreement among Lebanese, but it's mute. It's mute today. Syria cannot agree. I mean, it has 4 or 5 sections today. Iraq has 4 or 5 sections today. You know, Lebanon is so tiny, you know, we can divide it as many more pieces. Now, the mountain of Lebanon used to be a little bit independent from the Lebanon that we know today before 1920. And it used to combine mainly what we call the Christian, Maronite community, along with some of the Druze community, because they used to both be the minorities, and they have this mountain of Lebanon. But that was also done by the Ottomans, okay? And but then in 1920, the Lebanese all together, be it Muslims or Christians and all that, they agreed, and the patriarch at that time, PAWAC, he led that activity to make Lebanon the geographic area that we know of today, for many reasons, because so that we can learn how to live together, so that we can be a larger community and not continue to fight. That was the vision, I assume, plus economic, well-being and all that. And we never really made this happen properly. And that's many reasons. I do not want to only blame the politicians that took over, because I have been blaming them, but also we have neighbors that are more powerful than us. You got Israel south, you have Syria, next to us. And then you have all the Arab countries. Every once in a while, like Abdel Nasser, he wanted to have the unity. The Gulf, sometimes they have their dreams. Now Iran have their dreams. So we were never let alone. And we had ears that listen, to others. And, so now you had another part of your question that I did not catch, the very last part.
The second part was about the Assyrian Christian.
The Assyrian Christians, there are some of them, there are Lebanese. There are some of them that came because they ran away from Iraq. Okay. Now, when you say the Assyrian, let me.
It's the historical name, Assyrian. Assyrian.
Yeah, Assyrian. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I don't know that there is an Assyrian identity in Lebanon. Now, we Maronites, I am a Maronite. Now, there are other people that you know that are not. But the Maronites of Lebanon, we used the Aramaic, which is the language that Jesus spoke, which is it's a dialect of the Assyrian language, or they are similar. And that is the relationship to Lebanon being an Assyrian. Lebanon was never an Assyrian, but we used the Aramaic language, just like the Assyrian people in Iraq, they use that same language. You know, but we are never ethnically associated with Assyria, ASSY. We were never. I do not associate us with Assyria at all. No.
Okay, so one of the a couple of years ago, before the latest trials that have hit Lebanon, was a discovery of oil off the coast of Lebanon. Has Lebanon been able to capitalize on any of that, to drill for any of that, or is that still in contest?
No, never. No, we have never. Number one is Lebanon is still in disagreement with Israel on a little piece of the pie, but a very, very tiny piece. But Lebanon doesn't speak that we have another piece with Syria in the north, in the Mediterranean. Lebanon don't even dare to open the subject with Syria because we're still not a sovereign nation. And there is disagreement in the country whether we want to open the subject or not. Lebanon did not exercise that. It's working on resolving the issue with Israel, but in the meanwhile, we're not spending the time to start investing actually in the bigger blocks. I mean, we have this whole nation, and there is a little piece here that we're arguing with Israel on. But what about these other blocks? Why don't we go ahead and in it? I'll give you my opinion. I think the corrupted politicians are getting paid by somebody to just keep their mouth shut. Because usually what happened, and look, Don is agreeing with me. What happens usually is the politicians, when there is a project, the first thing they look at is that how much money they're going to make personally from it. So what about if anybody comes in and tell them, hey, you know, what about if I send you $40–50 million to your bank account in Switzerland and just keep your mouth shut? Don't let it happen. I am a believer that this is happening because somebody who cares about their country, who can go ahead and invest in that and start exploration and start bringing money to the country and give social programs to their people, they do not want this to happen. Why? There must be a personal reason, not a national reason. Yeah, because we know how to explore most of the, I mean, Lebanese all over, they know how to do that. They're doing it in the Gulf. They're doing it in the Halliburtons and the Chevrons and the Total of the world. And all of these, you know, companies also, they would love to come in and help us anyway. Certainly, you know, they get paid for their services and all that, but somebody in Lebanon do not want it to happen.
Well, that brings up an interesting question, because there are, as you know, a lot of expats, Lebanese people living all around the world who are quite successful, who would really both feel a personal sense of gratitude, but also, you know, look for the opportunity to invest in Lebanon. But it seems like the banking system and the level of corruption is such that the Lebanese living around the world are reluctant to do what you did, to come back and actually, you know, rebuild Lebanon. How can Lebanon sell itself to its own expat community more easily?
Let me tell you, Angela, I'm not going to tell you how much I lost in returning to Lebanon. But I think the main thing is that you must have trust. The government must give you trust. Today, there is negative trust for anybody to bring any penny in the country. In fact, if anybody who can take their money out, they will do it right away. By the way, I never mentioned that all our money is blocked, basically. They're blocked. I cannot touch my US dollar accounts except for, like, if you have, let's say that you have 100, they will allow you maybe for 2 or 3%, for $2-3 per month. And we are using multiple currencies today. So you buy your dollar at 1,500 or at 3,900 Lebanese lira. You spend it at 2,500, at 25,000. The government has a 1,500 for their businesses. They have a 3,900 for some businesses, and they have another level for 12,000 lira per dollar for other activities. And the street is 25,000. It is disastrous, you know. So by hijacking your money and by doing all of these, nobody will spend any penny. In fact, I need to bring money myself, you know, for my activities, and because I cannot use the money that I have in the banks, you know. And I do have an association. We're feeding, you know, I'm down to feeding only about 300 families a month. Plus I have other activities. To bring in money, I am afraid that in the process of sending money, you know, sending, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 is, at least you know that within a couple steps I can get them. But sending larger sums now, the central bank made an announcement 3 months ago that made everybody even, you know, scared, because he said that he may block half of it and give it to us at the 1,500 or the 3,900 exchange, while the street is 25,000. So he's going to rob half of it, basically.
Wow.
So no, so it is scary. The Lebanese people, I mean, there are many of them, just like I mean, I spent 39 years outside with you guys, and I came back to help in rebuild and to help, you know, in charity and people development. But I'm here. But many of my colleagues and my friends that came along, they all left, basically. Anybody who can leave today is leaving. Anybody, and especially the youth, but even adults. The youth, they have only one objective, a single objective, not anymore 2 objectives. One objective: get out and
Wow.
don't look back. Yeah.
So are your daughters, you had, when you moved back, one of your daughters was still in high school. Is she staying? Is she moved?
Yeah, well, I have 4. 2 of them married and left the country with their husbands, one in Paris, one in London. And then the other 2, they are working here. Now they, you know, we keep pushing them and trying to keep them. We need somebody to stay with us. But not only that, but one of them has been working before freelancing with multiple activities. And it just happened that many companies left the country, and many small companies left the country. So as like Magali, this one, she was working with 2, 3 different groups when they left. So what did the people that still need those services? They went to the second level help. So they start hiring her. So she's doing well and she is working. And she got also another job. I mean, she's doing multiple jobs, and one of them, you know, is with the Canadian group. So she got paid in US dollar, which is good. At least she's not subject to the exchange rate. And the one who was in high school, Leah, the little one, she just graduated from the American University, and she is working for a Detroit-based company, and she's getting paid with US dollar. So they're doing well, and Lebanon is a beautiful country socially and geographically and all of that. So it's going to come back, no question. But we need it to come back in a sustainable way. That's why we need the what I call the traditional politicians to just get out. Just get out. You know, let the country for people who really have different views, and they like each other. They want to be a single country, single society, and work on development and have a sovereign state that so it will come back. It will come back. You know, hopefully this it's another phase of moving from independence in 1945. You go through multiple stages. With the tough neighborhood, it takes us probably a little bit longer and more stages, but we'll make it.
So
Yeah.
I have to ask about the explosion at the port a year ago, in August of 20. It just seems like it was salt on an open wound, or maybe, you know, it was another major wound. I don't know, but it was a horrible event. How is Beirut coming back? Was that just, you know, contributing to the problems, or did it create a whole host of new problems for Lebanon?
Yeah, well, you call it an explosion. I call it a crime. Actually, it's a crime. Actually, it's a disaster. It has destroyed 1/3 of the city. But not only that, it has destroyed all of these lives too. Not only the 200+ people that were killed or the 7,000 that got seriously injured, but many tens of thousands are still homeless. There has been some reconstruction, some you know, refacing of the neighborhoods and all that, but it also destroyed additional destruction of the economy. We don't know whether the immediate cost was about $4 or $5 billion direct, plus few billions indirect, and still we're going through it. And especially when the country is in you know, in the economic situation that we are. So the impact of it has not gone away. There is no judicial. They're fighting the judicial system to continue the process, because the people that are responsible are well known. Everybody knows them. They are well known, but nobody dares, and they're not allowing basically the judicial system to continue the investigation. But the impact of it has been disastrous on the economic side, on the social side, for sure also. Yeah.
So a couple questions have come in. I'm going to put a plug in for those of us here in Peoria. The Peoria Riverfront Museum is going to be hosting a fundraiser for Lebanon. The funds will go to the Lebanese American University, which will then distribute them to, you know, whatever organizations like your own and others who need it. So it's not going to the government of Lebanon. So if anybody,
you're sending them to the Lebanese American University, the LAU in Beirut.
Actually, in New York.
In New York. Well, because they are associated with somebody in New York. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's the same one. They have. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I checked it out. So if you trust me, it's a legitimate contribution. I think the Lebanese Red Cross is also an organization that you can reach online, and that is also an organization.
Yes. Yeah.
So in any case, though, the museum is showing a movie and they've got a concert coming up. So I will send out information about that to the World Affairs Council members shortly. But Don brings up an interesting issue, corruption. That you know, corruption's a problem in many countries, but in terms of your upcoming election, the Al Jazeera posted an article a week ago that said, "Last hope: Lebanese abroad seek a say at polls." More than 240,000 members of the Lebanese diaspora have registered to vote in the upcoming elections, including the parliamentary election that you are running for. How might that affect your both your candidacy, but your country in general, if the diaspora is that interested in voting?
Yeah, this number of registry, basically, it scares the people who governs the country, who has control over the country, like Hezbollah or like the National Bloc, the president, and all. It scares the hell out of them. And the reason is because most of these people, the large majority of them, have left the country recently, or left the country because of the corruption and because of the lack of performance of the of the people in power. So they're going to vote against them, actually. And that could be a reason why they will do the best they can to delay or to not have the elections, the parliamentary elections at all. So they will do anything, even a security issue or whatever, because these 244, and they're spread all over the country. I can tell you in the district where I am running, there is 13,000 registered, okay? And on the total coalition of the 4 districts, there is 35,000, which means that they can cause the election of 3 parliamentaries among the 128. That's only in my area. Now, if you repeat that in many areas, they will make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Now, who they will vote for, we don't know, but the majority will vote against the ones in power today. And many of them have left only the last 18 months, okay? And they are free to choose. That's the other thing. They are free to choose. They don't have somebody with a gun in their head or holding their families hostage or holding them hostage. That doesn't mean, you know, with a gun, but actually going to the hospital, paying tuitions, all of these things. So the people that are outside, they are free to decide, you know, or at least 80% of them are free to make a decision, a free decision, and that does not please the people in power in Lebanon, for sure. Yep.
But freedom usually does not bode well for you know, corrupt and power-hungry officials. So yeah. Freedom goes against that.
Who spend their time exercising their power over people, basically. Like I said, in everything, you know, they will destroy your life. They will cause your business to close. They will let the school kick your children out. They will not let you go to the hospital, because usually you need help, you know, when you go to a hospital here, because the government doesn't give it to you. There's so many things, you know, tuitions, everything. They will disrupt everything for you. So you're a hostage, basically. But those 240 are free. They can make their decision. Yep.
So where would you recommend I mean, who are not Lebanese, so I can't vote in your elections, but how can we help here in Peoria? What can we do to help you? What can we do to help Lebanon?
Let me tell you, about a week ago, now that's my personal view, not necessarily all Lebanese would agree with me, but because I blame the current government and Hezbollah mainly, I'll tell you what I told the 3 congressmen that came here about a couple of weeks ago, and Senator Ted of Michigan. I forgot his last name. What we need to do as Lebanon is really continue our big pressure on Iran to really, you know, make it weaker so that it can stop, you know, imposing its will in Lebanon, in Yemen, in other places. Because Hezbollah has power only because somebody is behind him, okay? Syria and Iran need to be stopped by somebody. We cannot stop them. Will the international community, with the US on top of that, really be able to really cause them to start behave in a civilized way, and let other countries be alone? That I don't know what else we can ask you to do. You know, certainly the charity that you're now trying to do with the LAU and with other groups, there is a lot of help coming to Lebanon from many groups in the world, through the Red Cross, through the Caritases of the world, and all of that. And that is needed. That's badly needed. But we need to get out of our situation to cause the Lebanese politicians, who are puppets in the hands of Syria and Iran, for good reasons. I mean, they are puppets not because they want to be puppets only, but because they want to get their power through that. We need to put pressure on Iran and on Syria. Yeah.
So one last question that's come in is a question about that history of corruption. Do you think the current Lebanese government is a reaction to suppression by previous governments? I mean, is it like somebody?
Those politicians, people, those politicians, basically, a lot of them are the same ones. The people in power today, yeah, sometimes the person may have changed, but the agendas have not changed, and the politicians, the main ones, are still the same ones, or they are the sons and daughters of whoever was before. Okay, and then some of the parties, the new parties that came along, they are hungry for power, and they want their children or their relatives to become the future president or the future elect. So they look at the distribution of power. So they need Hezbollah support. So they go and become puppets because of they need their blessing, actually. But they are corrupt themselves. They inherited that, and the ones who did not inherit that, they became that. Okay, but while there are thousands of good people that really are not corrupt, do not want to be corrupt, but they are not allowed to really participate. It is difficult. I'm running in an area where I cannot find somebody to be my partner. They're all afraid. Everybody's afraid.
Wow.
They're extremely afraid to run. Yeah. It is difficult to run as a free individual. And then they have an election criteria that will force you to ally with somebody at the end. Just because the groups of the revolution could not really, so far, we cannot make a single alliance that is also free, that is also independent, and that also agrees on the main issues, like the sovereignty of the nation, and all of these other issues. So it's a difficult process.
You're persisting, though. You're not gonna back out of the electoral process.
I've always been a fighter, so I came here I did not want to. I wanted to retire and travel either to Peoria or to the other countries that I spent time in with Norma. But you get into it, and you got to do something, and you feel you can make a difference. So somebody have to fight it. Now, I did state when I left Peoria, if you remember, when we were at the Holiday Inn, or I don't know what it is called now, Grand Hotel or something, when I made the presentation, which part of it I made it at Caterpillar when I left, is I came here to make a difference. So I chose not to play golf and not to all that, but I was hoping that I didn't have to go as far as I'm going. But you got dragged into it. You cannot see people, in the situation that they are. You cannot see, what's happening. It's unbelievable. And if you can make a difference, I chose to do that. Yeah.
All right, we've got to let the students, we've got to cut them loose to go to class, but thank you. If you want to stay on for a few minutes, I'm sure there are a couple people who would like to say hello. Thank you, Mikhael Doueihi. Good luck in your parliamentary election. I hope that the election goes forward and that you are successful in your bid. On behalf of the Peoria Area World Affairs Council and Bradley University, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.